So we have a really great show for you tonight. Anyone who's been to 3D New York in New York live will recognize probably most everyone from this group of motley crew, other than maybe Ansi. I think Ansi's the only one who hasn't been to one of our 3D New York events in person.
But, yeah, I think we're also waiting for Anna, who's going to be joining us from London. So, kudos to her for doing the New York slot at basically 11.
The late shift, I love it. So we've got a great show. We have an amazing conversation with Kim Lee and Nancy. Kim, you want to kind of give us a quick intro into that?
Sure. I'm going to talk probably real quickly a little bit about how things are for the last few months with visual effects, at least my experience working at FuseFX in New York, and how it's impacted our side of the industry. And we'll probably just segue into Ansi's project, because he's also a visual effects supervisor down in New Orleans, and we'll segue into that and have some interesting talk.
Nice.
Yeah, then after that, we're happy to have Anna Parry joining us now, Belle Woodsen, and then Sam Anderson for a roundtable discussion, just talking about their experience in the industry and how we can promote growth and change in these uncertain times.
Awesome. And then we're going to close the show out with something a little bit different. We've got Matthew Bannister, aka The Beautiful Fear, who some of you might know from the industry for his other endeavors, but we're going to be talking music, creativity, inspiration, therapy, the whole thing. Music and creativity is going to be a really cool discussion, and Matthew's actually going to premiere one of his, or not premiere, it got released yesterday, I think. He's going to show us one of his super cool new music videos from his latest album. So that's very exciting, and we're all looking forward to that. If you don't know the New York event, I'm just going to share screen real quick and show you a little bit about what we do. We meet every, what is it, second Wednesday, guys? Is what we do?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the second Wednesday of every month we do. And we meet at Lucky Jack's down in the Lower East Side of New York. And it's basically down in a basement there, a bunch of geeks get together and talk about cool stuff that we're all doing in the 3D world, in ArchViz, in VFX. It's a really cool event. We get, as you can see from the slides, we get a good turnout. People come for the socializing, for the networking, to see the cool stuff that people are doing. And it's been going for, it was going for about a year before COVID. But we'll be back. We're back stronger than ever. We're hoping for a relaunch of 3D New York in early 2021, if all goes well. So yeah, keep an eye out for any announcements on that. There's a meetup page and a Facebook page that you can sign up to for any alerts and updates on all that stuff. So yeah, check us out, 3D New York. We'll be back hopefully live in 2021. In terms of other bits and pieces of housework I have to do, just show you. Yeah, we have there's a prizes and media giveaway, social media giveaway. So anyone who's watching has the chance to win some amazing prizes from Chaos Group, Autodesk, Sinai Software, and Creative Lighting. You can win a 1-year software license for V-Ray or Corona, your choice, a license to 3ds Max, a license for Sinai Software, and we're also giving away a free ticket for Nikos Nikolopoulos' Creative Lighting. What you've got to do is you've got to go onto the website. I think it's being displayed right now, hopefully, and register for the 24 hours of Chaos raffle. The registration can be found on the official event website, and the winner will be chosen randomly. So register as soon as you can. The other thing that I think was just displayed on the screen was if you want to win some cool t-shirts, mouse pads, and general Chaos Group swag, take a photo of the live stream or a selfie while watching it and share it in the official Facebook event. Hashtag 24 hours of chaos. And again, we'll announce the winner towards the end of the show. So without further ado, I'm going to move us back onto our regularly scheduled programming. We're running a little bit behind time, but that's okay. We'll blame the Brazilians. So I'm going to hand it off now to Kim Lee, who's going to do a little bit of talking himself, and then he's going to get into it with Ansi and talk some really cool VFX stuff. So Kim, why don't you take it from here?
Sure. Hi, guys. Hope everybody is good and well and healthy in whatever time zones you're watching this in. in case you don't know who I am, my name's Kim Lee. I'm senior CG generalist at the FuseFX New York office. I work in visual effects for episodics mostly. Basically, what I was going to talk about a little briefly is how the current world situation is affecting us in New York in the visual effects community. It's it's obviously everybody's going to be feeling it. Clearly, when things happened back in March, we had a lot of shows going that already had footage in the can, so we were able to just keep working for quite a while. We were actually one of the lucky shops that was pretty much going full steam all the way through in March, April, May, and June. Eventually, that footage was going to run out basically. So until they got crews shooting again. So we had a little bit of time off in July, and luckily some of us are back now working on stuff that we can be working on. But it definitely has impacted the industry, and I've worked on the live action side as well, so I know a lot of crew people who are out of work, and it's going to be really interesting moving forward, seeing what the different groups, the unions, SAG, the Directors Guild, all of them put together to actually keep those crews safe. Because really, being in VFX, we're at the end of the chain, which is why we were able to keep working for so long. But we're very dependent on new footage. I guess the only industry on the entertainment side that's the sector that's not really as affected would be, I would imagine, the Blue Skies and the Pixars. Anybody who's doing full CG content, because you don't need a crew to shoot stuff. So clearly, that's the difference between the two industries there, and we've felt it. But luckily, things are looking better, and crews are starting up. It just so happens, I'm going to share a little side note. My brother happens to be the art director for the new Elmo show on HBO, and he works on stuff for Sesame Street as well. And they were just shooting last week or the week before with very stringent on-set parameters put in place, different zones, people can't leave their zones. So definitely going to be slowing things down. And on episodics, that's going to affect production schedules, which of course then translates to affecting post-production schedules. So it'll be really interesting. It'll be interesting to hear if there is any talk of it in later shows for this 24 Hours of Chaos, to see just how the different parts of the world are dealing with the live action side of getting back to work. So I was going to talk about that a little bit, which I just did. And now I was going to actually start segueing in our first guest, Anselm, who happens to be a longtime friend of mine, an amazing artist, and he happens to be a visual effects supervisor on set. So he can actually speak currently much more directly on a major TV show. So he's based down in New Orleans. So we're lucky enough to have him as part of the New York time zone show. So maybe we can bring Ansi in, and I can throw some questions to him and get him started. There he is, Anselm von. All of his friends call him Ansi because that's a mouthful that you see on the screen there. So, but yes, our first guest, Anselm von Serthos. Ansi, how are you?
Mighty fine, mighty fine. Thanks for having me in the New York slot.
Always.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So I was wondering, so how has it affected you, this whole pandemic lockdown stuff down in New Orleans and work? What show is it you're the on-set supervisor for?
NCIS New Orleans, a spinoff of the Mark Harmon NCIS, and we shoot 10 months out the year here when there's not a pandemic. We were shut down pretty abruptly in the second week of March, 11th, 12th, in and around that. And ever since, there has been discussions between the unions, how we can bring it back, what protocols are there to follow, and the masks and the face shields and the little sections you can't leave, like a little bit what you talked about. So we were cut short 4 episodes this season. We do 24 a year usually.
So you only got 4 shot.
No, we got 20 shot. We were
Oh, you
then
got 20 shot. You were short 4. Okay.
Yeah. So we had a couple in the can that the post-production vendor could still post-produce and air, but that, like your shows, ran out eventually. And so luckily we all worked from home because I'm also doing VFX, of course, using V-Ray and 3ds Max and the like. Hence we are all on this top, right?
And before you were on set supervising, you had years of doing VFX artist work for clients remotely out of New Orleans, because New Orleans is not known as a hotbed for post-production. So
there is none.
Right, it's you.
And there's me and a handful. But yeah, I was a freelancer as of like 2004. I'm from Germany originally. I freelanced all over Europe. I was a project nomad essentially. It was very lonely, but I learned a crap ton of stuff, different pipelines of different shops, etc. Then in 2008, I moved to Los Angeles, got a job at Frantic Films. In 2010, so 10 years ago, I moved to New Orleans and worked remote ever since. Every once in a blue moon, I fly to client meetings in person, etc. So the interesting part is that for me, not that much had changed working remote on the computer during the pandemic because I had done it for the past 10 years.
Right. So what did you stopped working on NCIS New Orleans because they shut down, and you did, from what we had talked about before, you didn't have much going on to pick it up right away, right? But then something happened.
Yeah, so then I was contacted to work on the Iron Harvest game cinematic, along with a couple of other TV commercials and such. But yeah, prior to pandemic, I usually don't take on that much work because you know how call times are on TV shows. You got to keep your schedule pretty open. But yeah, anyways, pandemic hit, and I started on actually slightly prior to pandemic. I started on the Iron Harvest game cinematic for Capsule Studio, which happens to be in Paris, France. So I was always going to be remote. I would have loved to go.
Right. Well, and you're going to talk a little bit about that, right? So I guess we should run that video of the game trailer.
Mm-hmm. So Iron Harvest, the game came out yesterday, and that's where we can all talk behind the scenes, etc. So timing is fantastic for this.
Cool. So if the chaos powers that be can roll that video, that would be amazing. Amazing.
There we go.
There we go.
Should be live any second, and there we go.
Raz, dwa, trzy i giniesz ty!
Michał?
Capsule is located in Paris, France, a relatively new shop founded in 2016. And yeah, they made a name for themselves doing fantastic game cinematics for various indies and bigger like AAA games. And on this particular cinematic, at peak time, we were 30 people from 6 countries. Some always remote, but within a week we moved the entire operation in the cloud basically, and kept every department in touch like through Slack and services like such. And yeah, within a week we had this thing back on its feet and continued like ever before. But yeah, for me, not much has changed anyways, because I would have my meetings with the supervisor via Skype or Zoom anyways from the get-go. So while the studio was shifting to cloud work, I started creating generic stuff that wouldn't need animation, that wouldn't rely necessarily on other people's work like the animators or layout artists. So I started chopping away on various generic stuff that could play anywhere, basically.
So you're basically putting together library assets for the show, right? Right. So how long were you working on that? Just doing library assets?
I was on it. The library stuff I did for about 2-3 weeks, and then moved into shot work once there was animations, character animations, and things I needed to interact. But the whole project duration was 5 months from concept art. The concept artist who also designed all the maps for that game is pretty famous. He's big on Instagram and such. So we had things to work off prior that wasn't necessarily designed by Capsule itself. But yeah, I started chipping away on generic hits and things that assembly artists would place. I didn't render a single final frame. It was all synced in the cloud, and then they rendered it on their end.
Gotcha.
Yeah, on V-Ray Max.
Well, why don't we, before we jump into you showing some of the snippets and things that you worked on, just let the audience know that if anybody has questions, you can type them in. Hopefully they will get piped over to us by the Chaos people, and we'll get to them at the end, as many as we can. But for now, let's, Ansi, why don't we take a look at some of the behind the scenes stuff that you put together for the nice people of the world.
Let's see if this is airing live. Let's see.
So that's the only thing about these online events that you miss from the live ones, is that you can't say, "Is Brazil in the house?" and nobody yells. So it's kind of...
Yeah, I should be screen sharing because I'm kind of peeking at a live feed too.
Right.
And like there's a bit of a delay. I mean,
yeah, there is. Yeah, don't worry about the live feed.
Yeah. So what we see first was the first specific shot. That was the destruction of this hut. And this was actually a team was sent to this place in Poland. This is actually an old ancient village hut in Poland that was scanned with a photogrammetry. And if you know photogrammetry, it's not exactly light on the poly count side of things. Like every stone is modeled out and every piece of wood is high detail. So I went in and did slight remodeling here and there. And also things should not interpenetrate the geometry because that will freak out rigid body dynamic engines without going into too much detail there. So this is an actual scanned hut that is in Poland somewhere that was scanned that then I blew up.
Right.
This is all using
someone else handled the humans in this shot for you?
Yeah.
Right.
I would get alembics because they are the smoke eventually goes a little bit around them, and also I was never supposed to kill the kid, of course, because he plays a major role. So the where debris flies and where not is heavily art directed. So it's a close call, but he makes it. So that was that, and the next specific shot work was mowing down a whole bunch of trees by Gatling gun fire. I got early animation of this Gatling gun steampunk mecha, and I would link it long cylinder to basically the muzzle, and wherever it hit a tree, I would eventually start chopping those down. And this is just some grayscale renders because the cinematic in the end is relatively dark. So I wanted to make sure that we see this in full glory. Again, this is all Tyflow using FuseFX as the engine under the hood. And it's incredibly fast and easy to cache. And those caches is what I then eventually shared back with Capsule.
Right.
And
how was that? How was the creative process on both those kinds of shots, where you've got, you know, you're destroying the hut and you're showing them, you know, your first pass of mowing down the trees? Was there much art direction back and forth on refining those from them, from on a creative standpoint?
On the hut, more than the trees. At this point in the cinematic, there's so much happening, so many people firing. It just adds to the overall overwhelming that warfare is, I guess. The hut is the first big shot that is close up, and it's also a transition where we see the soldiers first firing out of this fog of war. So that went through a couple of versions for sure. But the trees they were pretty happy with what overall happens. And at that point, again, there's so much going on. There's just also that happening in the background.
Right, right. So you also did atmospherics, it looks like?
Yeah, hero atmospherics. Because again, this is the transition right after the hut explosion, where we first see the close-up soldiers shooting at our guys. And I got low poly versions of the soldiers as alembics, and they actually all interact with this fog of war. There's various layers of it.
Right.
But other atmospherics were just handled with like the V-Ray fog, like the generic V-Ray fog, and this atmospherics that was rather generic also there.
Right. And again, you would hand those back as cached.
Yeah,
files,
those are cached as
particles.
OpenVDBs.
Right.
Yeah, OpenVDB, and then rendered all in V-Ray volume grids.
Right.
Yeah, so that was the only really fog I did, and then a whole bunch of those beacons, the flares.
Right.
There was also a bunch of generics, and then here comes the fun part: is the automated gun rigs.
So what do you mean by automated gun rigs?
So this was all pre-cached in FuseFX, and the projectile ejection and the shell casing ejection, everything is handled by one particle system and 2 point helpers, one at the ejector and one at the muzzle. And even the FuseFX flaring of the muzzle flash, everything is timed through one particle system. So since I was not implementing this into the shots, I made it very easy. You link 2 point helpers and tell it start at frame 100, and it would start firing. So I did a bunch of automated setups for various types of mechs and soldiers. And also, a library of blood hits. This was rendered straight in Phoenix. But the main premise was literally to make it as easy as possible for assembly artists to be able to find their ways through the library and implement it in the actual scenes later, because I knew I would not be doing that. So having 1 point helper to merge and one cache to repoint to where it lives made it relatively simple, or so I hope, for the assembly guys.
Right. Also, all your liquid and mud and things like that, that was all being Phoenix.
We didn't end up doing that much liquid and mud. That would have been more on the forest floor, which tend to be very dark. You don't see much of it really.
Right.
But yeah, there's a ton of generic ground hits of, small moderate impact, early R&D on mowing down trees. This is all to scale in centimeters.
Right.
And yeah, tree dynamics were a big thing. These ground dynamics we see were later scrapped. We didn't need those. Again, you don't really see them. And there's this foot of this mecha, the Recon, in only one shot. And that was, you can just, in max terms, volume select and push this, and it'll do fine.
Nice.
And here's grass interaction. Again, this is all tie flow.
Right.
And then the mechs hit each other quite a bit with with their big guns. And this one uses ray fire and tie flow. This actually deforms the geometry and leaves a little scorch mark, like a decal. And yeah, small debris and sparks and all that. This was all like point at the mech and click play, basically.
Right. Well, it makes it very easy for scene integration for whatever artist is doing that.
Yeah. Because the project time-wise for the size of the company was pretty ambitious.
What was it?
It was 30 people for 5 months, and the assembly people probably make up the majority of the team. So they're strong generalists, kind of like you, a senior generalist.
Right.
And they were just many hats. So the easiest you can make it for everybody, the better the outcome will be. And
they provided all the assets for destruction for you, right? Everything is provided for you, trees and the mechs and all that stuff, right?
All these elements. The trees also were photogrammetry, so making accurate 3D geometry from photos.
Right, but only to a certain point, I think you had mentioned.
Yeah, up to about 2 meters, so like 8-10 feet. Above that, we never see that in the cinematic anyways.
Right.
I'm gonna pause on this frame right here. You can kind of see where it's just becoming a generic cylinder.
Right.
So some of the high res tree bark I had to also steam down in poly count a little bit. Because in the actual shots, there's like super high res tree trunks and like foreground elements, cut down trees, previously cut down trees. And it all had to interact.
Right.
So I kind of sometimes made my own versions of things as I needed them.
Cool. So we have, unless you have some more, we're supposed to stop, not stop now, but start seeing if anybody has any questions. So I'm not sure
Let's do that.
if there are any. I can continue out. I could continue talking to you and asking you questions all day, but I don't want to take over the whole conversation. So do we have any questions out there, James or Mengyi, from Chaos Central? About
it doesn't seem like we have. Yeah, it doesn't seem like we have any right now, but everybody.
I have one.
Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, this is a question from John Ogilvie. He says, "Amazing works. Thanks for sharing."
Thank you.
He's asking, when do you use Fume when Phoenix and then when TyFlow? So how do you decide between which different programs to use were there situations where different programs can be used? How do you make that choice? So we have Fume, Phoenix, and TyFlow. How do you make that choice?
That's a good one, because I own all those plugins and have so I have the variety. I still like FuseFX because I have used it since its first beta version. It's fits like a glove, second nature type thing to me at least. And also I can fall back on presets, or at least an effect that is similar that I have done in the past, and look how I did it and whatnot. I just have a bigger library for FuseFX, also more licenses. so I can sim versions parallel or start 2 shots at once and whatnot.
Was that the first atmospheric plugin you used back in the day?
The first one was Afterburn, which is from the
you
same
used that one,
company.
Right.
But yeah, the combination of those two. Phoenix is also fantastic. We did all the blood hit libraries and mud and whatnot in Phoenix.
Cool.
I just like Fume personally. That's but I have Phoenix, and sometimes I use Phoenix. It's very whatever's flavor of the month.
Yeah. Another question. Juan Cobo was asking if the photogrammetry assets that you talked about in the video, were they created by the team or were they stock assets?
You were breaking up there for a second. The photogrammetry was
it created by the team specifically for this project?
Yes, it is. They might have hired a company that goes actually to like on location and scans all those the buildings. But yes, those were specifically scanned for this show, and very specifically this particular hut. And it took me about a day or two to remodel certain assets so they work. And also, I never got texture shipped per se. They were. I just had to make sure that through my workflow, none of the links break, and they could load the cache in Paris and drag drop a giant, let's say, multi-sub material or V-Ray material tree on that, and everything would fit again. As a lot of like .tx textures and stuff like that.
Right. James, you want me to take the Tony question?
Yeah, there's one more question from Tony.
Yeah,
Should I
so
go?
we have one. Yeah, do you want to do it, or I'll
Sure, I can do it.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
So Tony has a question. How difficult was it to rig trees with TyFlow?
So I have done a lot of tree destruction using the particle flow toolboxes before TyFlow was out. It is the true successor to particle flow, in my opinion. So I had done a couple of approaches. It's not that difficult. You take the tree mesh, you separate it into leaves, the branches, and the main stem. The main stem was then pre-fractured and re-glued together using FuseFX glue. And then you can just hit it with a little sphere so the whole tree wobbles a little, or kill a bunch of fragments, and then that breaks the bindings and it starts falling to either side. That too was art directed. Like there's hidden geometry in all those scenes, like a cylinder pushing the tree slightly in the direction I wanted it to. One of the trees is also a transition to a new shot, so it had to land very specifically at a very certain point in time in front of the camera. And I would have several low poly objects that just push trees in directions I want. And then you glue your branches to the main stem. You cache the main stem, then you glue your branches, you cache that, then you attach the leaves, glue that. So in the end, you do it in 3 ways. That also allows you to art direct it very quick, because you don't have 500,000 leaves that all need to be a rigid body dynamically colliding with things. I would literally simulate only stems until, and showed that as a preview. Is that the timing you want? Because everything else then is just attached to them and follows blindly where they go and will eventually hit the ground or people or whatever. But yeah, you start broad strokes and then you go and add more detail and then the leaves and more detail. Broad strokes, stems first.
Thanks, Nancy. This is really great work, really cool work. I'm actually looking forward to seeing the game itself and maybe playing it some point, but thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank
First
you.
one from New York. Thank you for joining us. We're going to hand things over to my co-host, Mengyi.
Hi, everybody.
Mengyi, take it away.
Hello.
Take it away, Mengyi.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ansi. That was a great presentation. So
Thanks.
now I think we're going to go for something a little bit different. We have a wonderful roundtable for you today with Anna Parry joining us all the way again from London. So kudos to her for quite the time shift. We have Belle Woodsen, and then we also have Sam Anderson from Shop, which is where I am from as well. And, you know, like we just have a lot of different perspectives tonight, from all the way from business to crafting the art of 3D, and then all the way to how we can look at tech and take us to the next level with ArchViz. So Anna, I'm going to hand things off to you first to talk a little bit about your background.
Hey everybody, so I'm just going to try and share my screen. I've just got a couple of slides to show you. Everybody see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes. The joys of Zoom, hey? So yeah, just firstly, I just wanted to say thanks to you guys for including me tonight. Amazing lineup of people, super honored to be here, and special thanks to Mengyi for inviting me, so super cool. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Davidson, we're an architectural visualization studio based in Paddington. We've been around for just over 30 years, and we're based in Paddington. So we've been incredibly fortunate to work on some amazing schemes all over the world. So we work in most of the major cities around the world. And we're lucky enough to work with some incredible architects and designers, super inspiring. There's about 30 of us. And we're made up of a bunch of, well, just a bunch of creatives really. So we've got CGI artists, we've got architects, we've got designers, illustrators, photographers, you name it really. Whoever we can get our hands on really to make something interesting and looking good really. So I've been at Davidson for just over 8 years, and I'm proudly the first female company director. So I'm the projects director. I sit alongside the FD and the creative director, and I manage client relationships and new business. And I'm passionate about bringing positive change to our company and also to our industry. So I carried out a TED talk last year speaking about different initiatives to create gender equality. And so yeah, that's me. So thank you. Thanks again for having me.
Thank
I'll
you,
try
Anna.
and stop sharing now.
And I think next we're going to hear a little bit from Isabel, aka Belle Woodsen, who has recently also launched her own company, but also has quite a lot of experience basically with all the top visualization studios in the world.
Hi, I'm Belle Woodsen, and yeah, I just also want to share a couple of slides with you here. So I'm the founder and director of Belle Woodsen. I just founded this company recently in 2020. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, please follow Belle Woodsen. I've got a background in architecture, so I studied architecture in Germany and Austria a while ago. I honestly quit my master's degree to get this career, and I'm very happy I did this decision back then. I'm in visualization since 2016. That's when I went through the State of Art Academy in Venice. Then afterwards, I found a job in the UK, in London, and architecture office called Stephen Million. Because back then I didn't know what do I really want to do, is this what I want to do? So I just thought, okay, that's a good start. After that, I joined with lovely people from recent spaces for quite a while. Then I did some freelance in London as well. And after that, I spontaneously moved to Melbourne, joined Binion Studios in Melbourne, and then afterwards in New York. And that's what I'm still at the moment. I also want to share this lovely movie with you because this has inspired me to study architecture. And then I watched it again, and then it inspired me also to become a 3D artist. And I didn't know about that I could study VFX or animation back then. And yeah, I just made it from architecture into ArchViz, and I think in a short time, and I've been very, very happy since then. Thank you.
Thanks. And then last but not least, yes, great. So we have Sam, who, just a little bit of background, we've been together the same office for almost 5 years at this point, started off the same team and has since then really launched herself into the technology side of the office. So I'm going to give her the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mengyi. Hello, everyone. Good evening or morning or late night or whatever you want to call it. I am going to share my screen real quick for a few slides as well. And so, yeah, to give just a little bit of background, as Mengyi mentioned, I work at Shop with her, Shop Architects. The main office is based in New York. They have a wide range of projects, scales. So I was hired 5 years ago to, create renderings in-house for Shop. But Shop has a very great attitude towards research and development and thinking outside of the box and understanding how can we change design for the better. And so with this, I started to dive into game engines and really understand and see the potential with it. Not only just for virtual reality where people can get into this space and see it before it's built, or using VR as a design tool for how to build facades and such. But I think Shop has a really wonderful crew that want to push the boundaries further. So how can we get more people in this space? And how can we do this with visualization? And so we push the game engines a little bit further as far as architecture goes. And we actually built a 360 screen in our office. And so the point of this is to really get everyone into the space together to experience this interactive side of visualization, so that it's not just one person in a headset, but we can all be in this one space together and viewing a 360 animation, or have it detect your hands and play with it on the screen. But I think we also, wanted to understand how can we make this accessible to more than just people who can come into our office or get into a headset. So for the past year, we've really been diving into software development. And so how can we put architecture in the hands of everyone, our clients, people on the construction site, and give more information to that. So it's not like you have to know how to open Rhino and rotate around the model, or perhaps we could do this in a museum so that anyone can take a look at what's inside Barclays in Brooklyn without actually having to be in Brooklyn. And I think with COVID, it's really pushed this and heightened this excitement. And from our team, we've got a really great team. It's a small team, it's 3 people. But I think we are really excited to explore more. And I know that the topic of this discussion is, opportunity for change. And so I think, Shop Architects is really taking this moment to understand that and learn from each other. And so I am super honored and happy to be here talking with such talented people and humans. And I am excited to learn from you guys. So yes, thank you, Mengyi, for inviting me and having me on, and I will switch back to you now.
Thanks, Sam. So everybody who's watching this right now, if you have any questions, feel free to write in the Facebook, in the Twitch channel, or on YouTube, and we will answer them at the end of the session. And so, just going back to Sam, what you've been talking about and the idea of how, I'm really just going to address the elephant in the room, right? We're all currently going through a worldwide pandemic. Obviously, this has upended not only our personal lives, but also our professional lives. So I just want to hear from, all of you, if this whole process of working remotely, being away from your colleagues, understanding a sort of different social dynamic, has that really, impeded or encouraged, new innovation, whether it is on the technology front or socially within your team?
I think from our perspective, I guess super basically, we were playing around with the idea of, people being able to work remotely. It was kind of open to directors, and we were testing Teradicis and that kind of thing. This has actually forced a massive change. Obviously, we've got the entire company now working remotely, and so yes, initially that was challenging and getting all that figured out, but now, that's definitely going to change the culture. That's definitely changed the way we're going to work. It's also changed, it's massively changed the way we interact with our clients. We can't see them face to face anymore. But I think the biggest change for us is that our clients are having issues and they're coming to us to problem solve. And that's super exciting, for us and for our industry, because it's forcing change, and it's quick change, and there's money to pay for it. So for us, it's been really exciting, and lots of sort of, obviously not all exciting. Some of it's been very challenging, but on a positive note, there's been some innovating happening for sure.
Yeah, and I know Hayes Davidson has a very long history, as one of the originators of all of ArchViz as we know it today. Do you feel like there are ways for you to offer the same thing that you've previously offered with just client experience, just the work process and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have had a couple of issues. Remoting in isn't as seamless as I guess sitting next to somebody, and perhaps with some of the juniors, there's nothing quite like an art director saying, hey, how are you getting on? How can I help you with this? What's the, are you having problems with this? Let's talk it through. So I think from that level, that's quite a challenge. I'm not quite sure how anybody's overcoming, I think that would be my greatest concern, is how juniors are going to enter into this new way of working, because I think a whole bunch of senior people, they're probably quite enjoying it to a certain degree. They've got a lot more flexibility. They can hang out with their family more. There's greater benefit. It's the youngsters, I think, that I think need consideration and thought as to how we help them learn their trade, I'd say.
Right. It's really, I think, just that educational aspect of it that kind of comes naturally with being
support.
Part of the industry and the craft and just having that interaction that's missing right now.
Yeah, and building confidence.
Yeah, and I think, Sam, you were actually working remote for a while, right? Even before the pandemic hit, I think about 6 months before this.
Right. So yeah, at the beginning of the year, I was in LA working, and so I had a little bit of time to acclimate to the Zoom calls or the phone calls that are now so familiar, but at the time was a little bit foreign. And with a small new team, it did take some time to start to develop those relationships. And it's interesting, Anna, to hear you talk about like the youngsters, like someone so new in their career. But it's exciting to see events like this happening. I hope that people who are kind of diving into their careers now know that there are communities that exist, such as this community here, and that if you reach out to people, they will be more than willing to help and assist you. And so I think I've been very lucky to have a team that is always down to do that, and it's just a phone call away. As sometimes it doesn't even need to be a Zoom call. Just get on the phone. You don't have to be all set up with your camera and everything. So it was an interesting transition. But yeah, it's been, yeah, it's super fascinating to hear other people's experience as well.
And I know that your team, Sam, has been working on a few tools that would really help facilitate that. So not only, you know, just within the office, and from what I know, we now also have an app in place. So if you go to the office, you have to fill out something on the app before, so we can do all this contact tracing. But I also know that you've been working directly with clients to get, you know, their projects in their pockets. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Exactly, yeah. So we are, you know, we've developed a workflow in which we can take models from Revit, Rhino, 3ds Max, and really bring them down and put them into this app, so that when there are updates, we'll be able to share that. Or even today, I was able to send to a partner and be like, hey, if you want to check the progress, we have it here in the app if you want to just pull it up on your phone at any time. And so we have been user testing with some clients as well as other colleagues to see what the need is, what clients would want to see out of that, and how it can help everyone during this time to, you know, really help communication, to keep the design going throughout this kind of odd moment in life when you can't just be in a meeting and hash everything out at that moment. So yeah, so we're exploring a few different things. I think, you know, it's a little bit limitless right now, which is wonderful about some of these softwares and these game engines that we're able to use for this, is that there's a lot of possibilities. And so we are, you know, kind of figuring it all out as we go, but it's been really good so far.
Yeah, that's really, really great to hear. And, you know, like, especially after what we've seen with ANSI and, you know, what we do, and they're very, very different fields, right? One, we're working in game design, and one, you're working with buildings, which is real architecture. And you and I have recently had a conversation about this as well. So I'm going to turn this over to ANSI, you know, just like to ask a little bit about the sort of porosity between the two fields.
Yeah, what's interesting is how the VFX people and the architects and all that is kind of merging. Now that we do more and more detailed digital destruction, things we couldn't do 10, 15 years ago with computers, we turn to you guys quite a bit, because I don't know how much rebar is in a supporting column. I know how far apart 2x4s in the US have to be, which I learned from Kim. And so if you destroy something, you need to know about the structural integrity. And that is you guys, that is statical engineers, that goes in the field of BIM and other Autodesk tools that we just mimic because we cheated. It always has to look good from one or two angles. Another note to the COVID.
So exciting though, right?
Yeah, to the COVID discussion. Also, what I think happened with the pandemic is it liberated the office culture of visual effects. Because I can say from like Kim and my background, we used to go to offices and it was all swipe card and it's a closed network, because if you work on something Disney, nothing ever leaves the house. So you had to go into a shop. And now, like you said, with Terry and whatnot, there you go.
It's my test.
It's pretty liberating. And that also brings new questions like, who pays for your faster internet? And now your electricity bill is higher because you had to get a better computer that was an office expense before, etc. But yeah, it's interesting how that also liberated. But yeah, back to the merging skills.
I mean, to add to that, ANSI, not just rebar, but just everything in a building. When we do a lot of destruction at FuseFX for TV shows, and a lot of building destruction, obviously for television shows that are happening, and bombs or whatever, and more than just that, what's the plumbing look like? What else would we see when this stuff explodes other than bricks and drywall? So yeah, there's a lot of converging, even more so, of all the skill sets.
I mean, I think it's great. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I think it's nice to hear you say that, because I think sometimes we take it for granted that we have that education in our past and have that in our heads when we are designing these visuals and these images. And so it's funny because I see your stuff and I think, wow, that's amazing. I would love to do that. I'm so inspired by that. And you know, sometimes the static images can feel flat in my mind. And so I think I do take for granted that I do have this architectural knowledge that, you know, could be helpful to someone. Whereas I think, oh, why your skill level is far beyond mine and as far as visuals go. But I think that's, you know, something that I hope to break down those barriers and understand, you know, what I can offer you and what you could offer me, and you know, really grow these relationships in that way.
Yeah, Sam, I think it goes even beyond destruction too, because how often are you seeing just digitally, you know, set extensions done digitally with buildings that didn't exist? Well, they usually get designed by the production designer, but you want people on that team who actually know architecture. No, a building could never be built like that. Why are you putting that in the background? You know, things like that.
It's super exciting though, isn't it? You know, it's kind of like taking it to the next level, you know, bringing everybody together and sharing all the skills and appreciating, you know, where different people have different strengths. That's super exciting. I think that's
Yeah.
inspiring, you know, and that's
And
where,
also
where it's heading.
Yeah, and let's not forget the virtual production now, doing stuff in Unreal Engine in real time. We used to build stuff like we built facades for movies or TV shows. It's a bunch of plywood and a lot of paint and duct tape. Now that you can almost walk 360 around the building, like we need to think a lot more than just building a pretty facade and that it looks from one or two camera angles. And that entails a lot more architecture than just like set dressing and production design.
Yeah, I agreed. Nancy, the stuff that Sam's talking about, and when she was showing her stuff, about the VR and all that stuff, even though they're using it for a different end purpose to let a client or, you know, designer see what it's going to look like, directors who are starting to embrace virtual, building their shots virtually, even if it's just for previs, we don't know what they want their shot to be. So we have to now build not just for camera. So
right,
it's
I think
edging
it's
into the game and architectural world, you know, where gaming has to build everything, you know.
It's super great because now, you know, you talk about this concept of previs, which we didn't really have exist in architecture previously. And now because of these tools available, because you know, V-Ray is getting easier, Corona is getting easier, you have Enscape, you have Lumia, and you have all these tools that really facilitate the process of design. You can start creating previs much easier. You can start facilitating those conversations with the client much earlier, right? And I think like we've all been sort of using these tools. And so I want to ask you guys, if everybody starts having these tools in their pocket, what do you think is the next step? Like, how do we sort of further the design process and make, you know, ArchViz still relevant and while still being very accessible?
Right, like you said, you know, we're almost, you know, we could almost double our tool sets or toolkits, because if we do start to engage with these different industries and people with different backgrounds, I think we could really push the boundaries of this. And, you know, I mentioned that some images might seem flat at times, but maybe that's also just because I've been a little bit in the virtual reality world for a while now. But I would argue, you know, diversity with those tools will be very important, like not only with the industries and the tools themselves, but with the people that we're working with, to have diversity there. And so I do see that there was a question about like hierarchy on our team with 3 people. So we do have a leader who's, you know, managing the jobs and the deadlines, but each of us kind of have our own expertise of whether it's me who's focusing on visuals and assets, and then we have another person who is doing more of the coding, and then we are all in the game engine together, though, collaborating. But I would say, you know, with the future of this and kind of continuing to explore those toolkits, I can see, you know, real-time rendering really entering the scene even more. Like, I know it already has, but I think it's going to be very fascinating to see where that is. And also to see, you know, such as like how Hayes Davidson is going to start to explore that, and how, you know, how some of these companies that are primarily visualization might take cues from other industries. And I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be in the end result, but I just know there's a lot of talent out there, and so I'm excited to kind of see what's next for everyone.
Cool. That's great. I have a question. If I can jump in and ask a question, Mengyi.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I guess, you know, being very aware of what's happening in the news, what's happening, large corporations and employers responding to the recent sort of racial injustice protests. A lot of them with new commitments to equality, and being more aware of the, you know, the responsibilities that they have as we kind of seek to solve the deep problem of systemic racism. I know it's a big topic, but what actions do you think that leaders in our industries could or should be taking to be part of a positive change, whether that's something small or something more meaningful? I just wonder if you guys think what kind of responsibility we in the industry have to kind of forward that agenda.
I think we have a huge responsibility, you know, especially, you know, the leaders of the company, as you say. I think huge responsibility. I don't know what the answers are. And I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Nobody knows what the answers are. So we've actually been talking about it a lot at Hayes Davidson. We've set up a number of groups because it's, you know, it's a really difficult subject. It's, you know, it's really super important not to upset anybody, or, you know, well, it's just a really challenging subject. So for us, we have a series of meetings. I think we meet every couple of weeks. There's about 50% of the company attend these meetings. And we just try and talk about it as much as we can, learn from each other, and, you know, try and figure out what we can do as a company to actually help. You know, what are the options? What's out there that we can do? What's within our power? What's within our grasp? Because I think, you know, I'm personally incredibly passionate about, you know, making as much change as we possibly can.
Yeah, it's I'm aware it wasn't an easy question, so Anna, it was a great response, and thanks for taking it on. It's not it's something that I think we can often be pretty shy about talking about, because we're all kind of very aware of maybe saying the wrong thing, or
yeah,
or you know, our intentions are good, but we're just worried about being misinterpreted. So I think it's good to even start the conversation. It's great to hear that Hayes Davidson are having these kind of these meetings and these discussions. You know, I think it's definitely an important thing, and it's definitely something that we need to tackle head on, as you say, and just kind of deal with it and have uncomfortable conversations, risk being embarrassed, risk getting things wrong. But I think as long as your intentions are good, I think it's no, I think it's only going to help.
I think that's it. And there is a lot of fear about saying the wrong thing. Absolutely. But I mean, this is something that it's everywhere. You know, it's everybody. So I think it's really, really important that our industry try and do their bit, however small, you know, the gestures are. I think, you know, I think if we can build momentum on this, then I you know, we can try and make positive change. Because I think, you know, we're not the only industry that struggles with it, and you know, so it's not like a dirty secret of our industry. You know, everybody's struggling with it, and you know, everybody's talking about it at home with their partners, with their kids, with their families. You know, so it's, yeah, I think it's great that it's, you know, that everybody's talking about it. I think that's a good first step.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very conscious of, you know, like you say, it is something that affects lots of industries. I think our industry, maybe because there are elements of it that, you know, it's easier to get into industries like ours with you know, a slightly more privileged background. In all honesty, it's not a cheap industry to get into. It's not like anyone can go out and buy a powerful workstation and start learning these tools really easily. Although it's getting easier now, more and more easier as technology progresses. I mean, I'm very conscious of, you know, trying to Mengyi and Kim with me as well. We're very conscious of trying to make sure that our event becomes, you know, somewhere where people who are interested in the industry but maybe haven't seen people like them in the industry they can come to 3D New York and hopefully meet other people and get encouraged. And it's definitely something we're going to try and work on a little bit more when we relaunch the event in 2021. But it's great to hear that, you know, industry leaders like Davidson are taking on seriously. So that's very good.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. I think also, you know, just also having events like the one we are in right now, you know, because normally what we would have every year would be total chaos and it's focusing on location. But in a way, it's almost like COVID let us have this event, which is worldwide. And now we're really interfacing with the global audience like we would never have before. So there is a silver lining to all of this. So, you know, we should continue to really communicate this not only within our industry, but also, you know, like Sam and I, architecture, right? You know, we're also having these issues right now, and we're also having these sorts of conversations. And so, you know, to the panelists, I would really like to ask if you know, if you have things that you would consider that would help really diversify the fields. You know, Anna, you've mentioned some. I would really like to hear from Belle and also from Sam what they think.
Yeah, so I think, you know, one thing that I mentioned on briefly was, you know, trying to make buildings and architecture more accessible to everyone in a larger audience. And I think there's also a lot that we as architects need to learn from people of the, you know, of our communities and stuff as we are starting to build. And so I guess I'm very interested to see that link as technology continues to improve so much. Like, you know, each month there's something new. You know, how I guess I would challenge us all to think of that changing technology and our neighbors and our people, and how can there be a connection there? Can the building on the phone inspire someone that just walked by and saw a QR code and they knew that they could put their phone to this and see a building? Could that inspire someone to get into architecture who maybe not really be exposed to that in the past? I mean, I still think there's a lot to learn with that, but I think there is potential, and it will take some time to get there, but there's definitely no better time than now, as you mentioned, Mengyi, to start that process. It's so critical that we look at it right now.
And then even I think on a wider note, you know, I think over the last few years, we've really even just been diversifying in gender, you know, which I think is amazing considering where we were a few years ago. And, you know, even with Isabel starting her own company, really, I think that's an amazing achievement. And I would really like to hear from you about like some of the struggles you've been through and your experience kind of starting that business from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, starting a new business in a pandemic, I think most of the people would say no, not at all. I mean, this is kind of a brave thing to do, but I feel like if not now, then when? So I don't know if there's a good time to start a new business, but I feel like, yeah, let's just do it and see what comes out. And I mean, I'm really passionate about this job, and I'm passionate about a lot of things. I also want to make universities more aware of this kind of job that I'm doing, and especially like in Germany, people don't really know how to render. They don't really know how to use Photoshop. So I want to make it my mission to bring those skills to those universities. Because there are, for example, lots of girls who probably have really good interior or styling skills, but they're probably afraid of the technology. So if you can get this across that this job is actually not so difficult in terms of technology, we could, for example, get more girls in the industry, which would, I think, be a very, very great benefit. And yeah, in general, I also want to say that, yeah, we just need to consider other people for this industry, from like product design or even fashion, interior design, games, because everything you need is just like having a good eye for something. And there are so many talented people out there. I mean, I studied architecture. I didn't have a clue about interior design, but I kind of developed the skills. And yeah, it just comes. It's like learning by doing, I would say. And yeah, if you develop a passion, I think you will be able to find a job in this industry. And I think that's all you need.
Yeah, and then you just talked about sort of your experience with interior design, and do you feel like over the last few years working in that's helped really develop your range so that you can start to have easier conversations with that side of the client?
Exactly. I mean, I started this job and I thought, okay, I'm probably just going to do exteriors. But then I had to do a couple of interiors and I thought, oh, this is actually really cool and I can go more photorealistic. And yeah, I got really interested in interior design. It's amazing. I love doing this. So I'm pretty sure there are more people out there who might feel the same.
I think you're exactly right. I think it's, you know, perhaps in the past, you know, people have thought that it's an industry for, you know, you have to be super techie to be interested in it. But I think you're exactly right. You know, there really is a place for everybody, and somebody with a great eye, that's what we need. I mean, you know, that's invaluable, isn't it? And that's something you can't even really teach. Somebody who knows how to make something look good, and that's a big part of it, I'd say. I mean, we're actually advertising at the moment for artists, and we had only 5. So we're advertising for senior artists. Only 5% were female.
Wow.
Yeah, which is, you know, disappointing or shocking or alarming or. But then we had we do a summer placement every year for a bunch of uni students or people who have just graduated, and that's usually a mixture of, you know, where they've come from or their education. And so this year, because of COVID, we did an online webinar, and that was 50-50 male and female. So that's really encouraging. Yeah, so that's really, really encouraging that actually, you know, maybe, you know, in a couple of years, there's a lot of people coming through. So I do think there's a big education piece to be done, you know, in sort of unis or perhaps before, you know, school level.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was in school, the girls didn't play football, so, you know, and that's completely changed. My niece plays football, so, you know, I think we've got to get it down to the sort of, you know, to the youngsters. I think that it's cool.
I think actually, Kim, you had a question, right, about VFX?
I've actually got a two-part question. One is having to do what Rana was just talking about. I'm modifying it because it's contextual. It's interesting because in our industry on the VFX side, what I've seen over 25 years is in the 3D side, it's mostly a sausage fest. It's mostly males. And so I can't say that on the air. This is the New York show. We can say anything, right?
All right, everybody's asleep over here, so you'll be fine.
I'm just trying to wake everybody up, make sure they're all ready for the next time zone.
You can say whatever the fuck you want, okay?
Well, there you go. There we go. First F-bomb of the show. Nice. So, no, but seriously, our industry has historically, I mean, going to SIGGRAPH in the beginning, back in '95 was my first SIGGRAPH. It was all guys, pretty much. And the joke was always that. What I've seen in the industry on our side is mostly compositing and producing is where the females have made a actually there's a sizable number, which is great. I still don't understand why predominantly males are in 3D. I don't know why that is. It doesn't need to be, but it's just an interesting thing. I wonder in all of our questions about this equality stuff, like, well, what goes into the reality that we're in now? Why is it that way?
Yeah.
Is it just because of, you know, less interest, or is it because of those barriers? My other question was kind of about what we had talked about earlier, where we're seeing this blending of these skill sets. You guys are doing some amazing work on the ArchViz side that I'm always inspired by, things from your companies companies like DBOX, the list goes on. How often do you find, now that there's so much crossover in the skill sets, whether it's because we're all using similar tools, whether it's Max or Maya or whatever, or compositing tools or VR tools, how often do you find in your companies, and then your perception of a whole in the industry for ArchViz, how often do you hire from your sister industries like VFX or gaming, people who are looking for work that have a background, you know, in a similar field? How often does that happen?
Who do you want to answer?
Whichever one of you talks first.
So that'll be you, Anna, unfortunately.
Anna, that's you.
So I just didn't want to, I just wanted to give others the chance. So yeah, we're actually hiring for an Unreal artist at the moment. That's the first time we've done that. But I guess for an Unreal artist, that might be quite confusing as to what skills we're expecting, or they might be questioning what skills they're lacking.
Well, like for lighting in 3D, whether you're lighting in 3D for a TV series, a movie, or game cinematic, or an architectural rendering, really how much difference is there that goes into that from the artist's point of view, right?
Yeah.
That's what that is a little bit more what I was thinking. Those kind of fields, definitely the Unreal for nowadays.
I don't know. I guess for me, because I've got a product design background, and I went to art college, and I don't know. I'm of the opinion that if somebody's really good and they're really passionate, then I think we'll find a place for them. So maybe that's a cop-out answer, but I'd really like to see a big mix of all the industries coming together, because I think there could be some amazing work. I think companies have probably got stuck in their ways, and there's probably quite a lot of set job specs, and you tick all the boxes, so you apply for the job. And I think there's probably a time when it can get a bit more fluid than that, and a little bit more, a bit more collaborative maybe. So I'm not sure if that satisfies your answer, but I think I would like to see more collaboration, because I think that's how the work's going to be pushed on and become more interesting, and push the boundaries really.
What about you, Sam or Belle? What do you guys think about that?
So I think I would love to see job boards that kind of include different industries, because for architecture, there's these specific job boards that people will go to and apply for jobs. So if architecture is trying to find someone in game design, it's like, where do we go to? I don't know. I don't know where those people are looking for jobs. And is someone who's designing games, are they interested in architecture? And like, would that be something that's interesting to them? So I would love to see kind of more cross-platform job boards, and maybe they're out and I just don't know about it. But I think that's the problem, is that if we don't know about it, then I think it's going to make it more difficult to kind of blend those worlds. So I would love to see that, just to kind of open doors for people and to allow there to be some cross-pollination.
I also want to say that I really think that we should merge forces with, for example, the games industry or the film industry, just because our output can be so much better. We can benefit from each other, and I think we can create something amazing if we get an idea what the other industry does, and we can implement it, and we can learn so much from each other. And I think it would be wonderful. And then it's not just ArchViz anymore. It's not like a creative industry. It's like a bigger thing, and I think that could be great. And we can get jobs that are out of what we are doing at the moment. We can expand our skills and basically provide more services. And I think that could be very beneficial.
So I think we're actually short on time for this roundtable. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask in any of the channels. One last one from me, speaking to what you had spoken about, Belle. what advice would you really give someone that's starting right now as a 3D artist in our current environment, with our current levels of communication, with what we've just talked about and what we're looking for? I know it's a big question, but like any sort of advice I think would help our audience.
Yeah, so I thought about this a lot. I mean, when I started out, things were different, but I think nowadays social media is really important. Very important, I think, is Instagram. So if you want to start out in this industry, I would say do your homework and research the company where you want to apply for, and find out what they do and what they could need. And yeah, just try to be creative, and maybe in the beginning don't ask for a job, but maybe ask for advice. Maybe what could you do better with your images? Engage with those companies, like follow them on Instagram, make comments, and they might follow you back and they will see your potential. And in general, I think our industry is very, very friendly, and people want you to help climb this ladder. I mean, just a couple of years ago, I was just an architect, and I think everyone can do this if you're passionate about something, and people will see your passion. And what you need is, you only need one person to believe in you, and then you will go your way. So just you know, you have to know you are unique, and you will find your way if you want to find this way. So yeah, I think that's the advice I can give you. Use social media as much as possible, because we can't attend conferences and shake hands. But I think everyone can do social media. Yeah.
Sam, I know you guys are always looking for new creative people, so I want to hear what you think would be a great quality for 3D artists these days.
Yeah, I think, you know, the eagerness to learn. I think it's very comfortable to stick with a program that you know really well. So, you know, if you take anything from the stuff that we've talked about today, I hope you take this moment and say, okay, I'm going to learn something new. Hopefully we can inspire you to do this. And I would say to all the women out there, or people of color, that you know, it is possible. And if you really broaden your scope and you know, feel free to reach out and learn more. I would say the eagerness to learn and like the passion, some of the stuff that Anna talked about, could, you know, be very helpful and help knock down some of those barriers.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to let you have the closing word, and then we have to move on to James and Matthew.
Oh, any
Then
youngsters?
I let you go to bed.
No, it's been great fun. To any youngsters out there, I'd just say just passionate, enthusiastic, and wanting to learn. I think that's the main thing, because you can feel it and you can see it, you know, and that's all you want, you know, from any team you're working with, just their eagerness, I'd say. And if you work hard, you'll get there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And the amount you can learn on YouTube these days is amazing.
yeah,
Agreed.
yeah, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, you kids don't
Thanks,
know how
everyone.
good you have it.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah, no handbooks.
That was great fun.
No kidding.
All right,
Social
well,
media
thank
is
you
stupid.
so much, everyone. Thank you, Belle, thank you, Sam, and thank you, Anna, for joining us. Amazing. And now I think we're going to close this out with James leading a conversation with our good friend Matthew.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Matthew
Again.
Bannister, are you there? Is the camera working? There he is, the man himself. Matthew Bannister, aka the Beautiful Fear. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
No
I hope
problem
I
at all.
don't bore everybody to death, because we've got no renderings to show here.
I know I've
Just-
got a fear.
just
I've got
me.
a fear that we're going to get a lot of questions about your other career, because we're not talking about your renderings today. We're talking about your music.
Well, that's
So,
good, because I haven't done a rendering in about 18 years. So.
See, it's good to be at the top.
Don't rub it in, Matthew.
Delegation is the name of the game. All right. So talk about that soon. But I think, you know, a lot of people obviously on this channel know you as Mr. DBOX, Matthew Bannister. But we're going to talk about, like I said, about your other career, your other life, as The Beautiful Fear. So maybe give us a little bit of background, you know, in terms of music. I mean, in a previous interview, you said that DBOX originally started as a band as well as a visualization studio. You clearly, music has been a big part of your life throughout your life. Has it always been a passion? Was it something you were into growing up?
Music is, yeah, I think music's always been the most important thing to me, actually. I mean, I wish I'd studied music. It's a big regret that I have. I went to art school first, before architecture school, before DBOX and all that stuff. And if I could do it all over again, maybe I would have done music. You know, I grew up in a house where my mother would constantly have music on, and you know, it was as I remember it, she used to have, everybody else used to leave the house and she'd put West Side Story on, and we would sing and dance and jump around together.
That's great. That's great. I guess, you know, for me, and like anyone who's kind of into music, college is a time where you start to really find, you know, new music, stuff you've never heard of, and you kind of develop your musical taste. What was it like, you know, coming to the US, first of all, New York and Cornell? How did that kind of shape your, you know, your musical taste and your direction?
Ooh, musical taste and direction. I mean, I was very lucky that I had an older brother who dragged me to shows at a very early age. I mean, I saw the Cure in a small venue that fit about 50 people as a 12-year-old in '79, and we sat and drank and had a meal with the Cure before they actually went on stage. So I was lucky that I had a kind of an older brother, and at a kind of a perfect time. And when I first came to the US, I was also very fortunate when I first came to the US in like 1981. Had another friend drag me to CBGB's when I was 16 for a hardcore matinee, and that was to see Minor Threat, and that was kind of like visiting an alternate universe, a sort of really secret and underground music. And in many ways, that's something that's always been a big influence to me. I mean, going back to your question, in college, I mean, we did start a band in college that was kind of the beginnings of DBOX. I mean, several of the DBOX founders, myself, were in a band in New York. We played all the clubs, and in some ways, at the beginning, the band was more important than Dialog Box.
Mm-hmm.
But music doesn't pay the rent, so.
Yeah, I mean, that was what I was going to say. I mean, were they always kind of easy bedfellows, or was there a point in time where you had to make the decision to, you know, to move away from music and to maybe to put more of your time into the thing that was paying the bills? And how was that kind of, how was that?
I think it was incredibly important because, you know, as Kim alluded to back then, it was very difficult. You know, incredibly slow computers that crashed all the time, madly demanding clients that would send us, you know, sheets of drawings that you would actually measure with rulers and make the computer models that. I mean, it's all inconceivable now. So after a day of that, you know, we would, as a band, you know, we had an office on Fifth Avenue at, that sounds fancy, doesn't it? But Fifth Avenue then in the 30s actually wasn't fancy. And we used to just put our Marshall amps into the elevator, and we would push them about 4 blocks down to a rehearsal space at Tin Pan Alley. And every night after dealing with clients all day, to be able to turn it up to 11 and just kind of lose yourself in music was incredibly important. I don't think, I don't think I could have gotten through those early DBOX years without it turned up to 11 in most evenings.
Yeah, it seems like, by the sounds of it, you've kind of, you know, music has been a kind of a source of release for you throughout the years, and you know, in terms of those professional pressure.
It's funny you should use that word release. That was the band. That was the band. The band that I was in with other DBOX characters was actually called Release.
Oh, really? That's great. But I guess
so you nailed it there.
Yeah, I guess that kind of leads on nicely to, I guess, the inception of this album, which it feels like again is a form of release, a bit of a dealing with the pressures of another, an outside, a sort of another area of your life, putting pressure in your life and through it, or to at least express it. I wonder if you could maybe just talk a little bit about where the idea and the inception of this album came from, and how that led to kind of narrative, because this album does have a very clear kind of narrative arc.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like this for all musicians, but the way in which it kind of works is that you can't stop doing music. It comes to you all the time, and sometimes it comes down to you as a kind of almost a complete song, and you quickly have to develop it with an instrument. Or sometimes you pick up an instrument and you start to chip away at it, and you start to lyrics come, and you don't necessarily know what they are to begin with. So you have to, it's almost like a bit of detective work into what is making you write this. And I try and be very true and honest to that process. I don't sit and say, I'm going to write a song about this. I actually try and figure out what I'm writing in the process of making it. And some of the first songs I started working on about 10 years ago, it seems that the themes that I was unpacking were adding up to something, and they were all a big question that I had to kind of answer in certain ways in which I was kind of conducting my life, and in many ways losing the steering wheel. And so the songs, when I started to create those songs, some of the early songs, like the song on the album Pray of the Power, is a song that I started to write back in 2010. And that was a song I started to write after of kind of my first failed attempt at AA. And various other songs started to come. And I created another album back in 2016, but these songs were all ones I was kind of working on in the background up until about a year and a half ago. And really the narrative of the album is actually is really the wheels coming off due to lots of things, and the process of actually attempting to just be a better version of myself and get sober. I've been sober for 6 years now, and it enabled me, cheers man, and it enabled me to actually to write this record. I don't think I could have written the record if I still was behaving the way I was behaving. I mean, I was making music back then, but I wasn't able to focus it and use it as a form of therapy. I know that sounds kind of corny, but it's been a very, very important part of my recovery.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to hear that you kind of started this album and these songs, and in the meantime all of this stuff was happening. But I guess in the sense that this music was happening, I mean, did you know at the time when you were writing this music 10 years ago what it was about, what it was ultimately going to all be about? Or, you know, did this just kind of reveal itself over time that, you know, at some point you realized, oh, this is why I'm writing these songs. Like, these songs are a result of the things I'm going through. Because you noted that you actually released other music in 2016 that was,
yeah, I mean, the record that I released in 2016 is almost is in some ways almost like kind of the dress rehearsal for this record. And a lot of the songs I was working on simultaneously, it was as if the songs that ended up on the first record are just, for one reason or another, the songs that I kind of finished first. But I mean, it could have been basically a triple album if I'd been more patient.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing. It's all the same song.
Yeah.
It's only a few chords, same lyrics over and over.
It's definitely not all the same song. I've listened to it. It's a phenomenal piece of work. I mean, it's breathtaking in its scope and its scale and its ambition. And one of the things when I was listening to it, and after you told me that you had spent 10 years, and you can hear those 10 years, not in a negative sense, but you can hear the thought and the effort and the patience. I think you just alluded to that. There's a lot of patience in this album in terms of you can feel that you have gone through a lot to kind of find the right song, the right chords, the right notes, the right words for each song. And I wonder if, coming from the environment that we're all familiar with, and you alluded to earlier, very demanding clients and everything having to be done now, if there's a great pleasure to be had, or at least a therapeutic pleasure to be had, in actually having no time constraints and being able to say, I'm going to finish this when it's ready. I'm just going to let it happen.
Yeah, I think that is that's a wonderful thing, and I would encourage everybody to take on a bigger piece of work, something that you really have to, write yourself a novel, whether that's visually or musically or something. I think it's a very important thing to leave behind. Yeah. Not that I'm going anywhere, or at least I hope I'm not going anywhere soon. But I mean, I think that we all do works, but the idea of embarking on something with no time constraints and no clients other than yourself, which I hope would be far more critical and difficult than any client you could ever face. I think it's a really good thing to do, and I would encourage everybody to try and do that. I mean, in this industry, we look back at we don't look back, but we continue to look at Alex Roman, his piece.
Yeah.
And that piece that's one of those pieces.
Yeah.
It's, the amount of insanely early mornings and late nights and redoing things in order to get something to a place where you feel it's right. You can see that in his work, and I'm not comparing what I've done to that, but I would imagine the process at least was very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's and I think it's when you're putting something out as personal as this album clearly is to you. I mean, it's no wonder that it takes a long time, because when you're being as vulnerable as you are, when you're showing this kind of side of yourself and putting these kind of songs out and this kind of album out, is that you want to make sure it's right, or as right as it's ever going to be. And I wonder if you can talk about that feeling of, like, really, we all expose ourselves to a certain extent as creatives, but this feels to me an extreme act of vulnerability, an extreme act of, like, really putting yourself out there. And I wonder if that's something that you are conscious of, if it's something that you have to talk yourself into, or if it's something that you feel is just a necessary thing of wanting people to hear your music. Because for me, I dabbled a little bit with guitar, but I think I played in front of people on a grand total of 2 times, because I hated that level of exposure, that level of just me and them. I find it amazing and very admirable that you've been able to release this album. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, the act of vulnerability.
Well, I think you're probably, are you talking about some of the themes in the album which are pretty dark? Is that?
Yeah, some of the themes are obviously extremely personal and quite dark, and I wonder if it's part of this. You kind of touched on this idea of it being a therapeutic thing. Is part of that therapeutic thing of letting this album out, and so that everybody can hear that side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, at least for me, in all of the creative work that I've done, I have to make myself uncomfortable in order to get myself to the place to make something that I think might be good.
Yeah,
it can't be comfortable, and facing my fears and my issues and my problems, and digging up some old trunks of of the past, only to find that there were trunks buried underneath trunks and suitcases underneath suitcases, full of all sorts of junk that I had to figure out in a piece of creativity, is simultaneously liberating and incredibly terrifying, because you do get to the point where you've made all this stuff and you've said all this stuff about things that you've done and things that have happened to you in your life. And that's all very well and good when you're in this room that I'm in right now by yourself, but then you suddenly realize that if you don't make it available for others to connect with, not only are you looking, in the mirror like a vampire, but you're also, you're not in any way helping anybody else who might be struggling.
Sure.
I mean, the record, I mean, my overall intention for the record is to kind of, is to comfort the uncomfortable and to unsettle the settled.
That's great. I love that.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. That actually kind of.
My hopes is that if people listen to it, if they're going through any kind of any personal trauma on any level, I think that my hope is that they will find that the record as a kind of a piece, as a concept. If you listen to it, I'm hoping that they'll find that there's kind of a space in there. It's spatial. There's a room. There's a place to go find.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
No,
You've listened to it carefully.
It makes absolutely perfect sense. I think it's I think anyone who's listened to the album would fully understand what you're saying. I think anyone who hasn't listened to the album, please go ahead, give yourself a treat and listen to it. Yes, Kim?
I was wondering, could I ask Matthew a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So, obviously, coming from another fellow musician, but there's probably in the audience tons of people who are not only doing visualization in whatever industry, but they're artists in other mediums as well, just like with us with music. Before you write an album or do an album, you've done a few now, you're a different person when you come out the other end. You're changed just by the process of creating that art. How do you feel that in your experience of doing this most recent album or the previous one, has it affected has it influenced your life with DBOX creatively in any way? I'm just wondering how its influence are felt outside of just the music and the personal.
I think it's helped me in lots of ways. I do think that I think that music is incredibly challenging. It's a little bit like making it. It's not a little bit like. Let me try and give an example. Imagine if you were to try and create an animation, but you couldn't actually render a still. Because music moves; it doesn't sit still. So you never get a chance to look at it and decide what's to fix. It actually moves the whole time. It's like it's like you're chasing something. And then just in concept, the fact that you're working with such a broad range of frequencies that take up space. If you think or make an analogy to the values within an image, you can start applying some of the things you've learned about creating music and putting things in space and using frequencies the same way as you can think about color and light and composition within a visual. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I know that working with music as intense as I have over the last 10 years, I think is helped me visually in ways that I don't think I would have. I don't think my ability to hone in visually would be as good as it is now if I hadn't gone through this process.
Yes.
That sounds like a really fucking garbled response.
No,
That's
it's not.
it's a good answer.
It's
I think
yeah, I mean, it's what I actually find myself sometimes using the analogies. It's, you know, and I'll give a really basic one, is that, you know, something like, you know, a little vignette moment, you know, the obligatory little tree that hangs over in front of the rendering. It's just like, and I look at that and I go, if that was music, would that be necessary in this one? Probably not. Or let's say a building that I can see that all of the highlights are highlighted so much with this idea that you're making it punch, but what you've done is you've turned so many things up to 11 that nothing is powerful anymore. It's like you have to back everything off,
Which is analogous to the mixing, right?
which is totally analogous to the mixing. There's a part in one of the songs, Arndale Whale, right? There's a part in the song which is only about probably 30 seconds long. It's this bridge part, and I spent 4 months mixing this part because in my mind it was this most powerful rise, and it had to be so powerful. And so all of my instincts was to make everything so strong, and no matter how I mixed it, it just had no power. And so then I just started to just pull everything away until I found the right combination to just strike everything through. And you know, it's not an incredibly powerful part, but it's a hell of a lot more powerful than it was when I was approaching it in the wrong way. And it's things like that that have helped me visually. So I'm able to quickly look at something and I relate it to what I've learned from producing music and go, I can see how to fix that so easily. It's amazing how it's all interconnected. I'm not a religious person at all, but there's a certain spirituality in that, in the relationship between some of the arts that always just leaves me kind of gobsmacked.
Totally agreed. Yeah.
Matthew, I think we have held it back from the audience for long enough. I think it's time to let them actually hear and see some of your work. Video.
Yeah, I mean, but are we going to run out of time? Because there's something I've got to say before we look at this video.
Yeah, I was going to let you introduce the video yourself.
Okay. I quickly introduce the video. The video we're going to play, I think, is Present But Never There. Is that the one we're going to play?
That's correct. Yeah.
And just want to let everybody know that all the CG work in this video was done by my dear friend Neil Griffiths, fellow DBOXer. The process for this was actually a very interesting process for this. It was one where I actually I let go of the steering wheel a little bit. The previous videos were incredibly conceptual and very particular. I had made a video of myself performing this that I actually really disliked, and I showed it to Neil, and Neil's suggestion was, well, you've made this thing that looks like it's on a TV, so let's put it on a TV and throw it out of a window. And I was like, well, let's go with it.
Okay, so let's see the video. This is Present But Never There by The Beautiful Fear.
Imagining that this is normal, I could find other ways to fill the boredom, use my time. I can get over this, a feeling like it's never Christmas. I can keep going over how to do this day by day. But something's missing, something's there, it's like I've left something somewhere. Have I forgotten something, or has something forgotten me? I don't want to give up anything. I Tonight you've all to see 12 honest steps with myself. One selfish one for me, for me, for me. I don't wanna give up anything. I don't wanna give up everything. Could get used to this. Imagine this brain is normal. I could find other ways to kill the boredom, kill this time. Something's missing, something's there. It's like I've lived something somewhere. Something's missing, something's there. It's like I've left myself somewhere. Something's missing, something's there. It's like I've lived something somewhere. Something's missing, something's there. It's like I've left myself somewhere.
Well, I think that was phenomenal. A really just unbelievable piece of work from beautiful Fear and Matthew. Really amazing.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate
No problem. I wish we could have talked for another 5 hours. We could have got through it all, but unfortunately we are limited by time. And as you can see, everyone, we're joined by all the guys from show number 4. Give us all the wave, Montreal. Love it. Okay, I have some very, very quick housekeeping to do, and then I'm going to hand over the show to you. We had a couple of winners from the show, the prizes the giveaways we announced earlier. The lucky person who won a 1-year software license for, let's see, the Vera Corona, your choice was Gabriela Gerotto. And the winner of the hashtag competition with all the swag and stuff was Florian Frey from Holland, Netherlands. Great. So I think that just about covers everything we're supposed to cover, unless anyone has anything you want to tell me to do before we hand over to show number 4. But I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone, to Matthew, the beautiful Fear, to Anna, to Belle, Isabel, to Samantha, my Anselm, obviously, and his baby squirrel that nobody got to see. We'll tell you about that another time. Which has been stealing the show on the YouTube chat, by the way. And of course, Mengyi, my 2 great co-hosts. So we'll pass on now to show number 4. We're a minute over. I'm sorry. We did our best to claw back.
Thanks, everybody.
So over to you guys. Over to you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.